y'all. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Oliveira, and I'm at the University of Massachusetts. And this is some work with my co-authors, Croson and Eckel, who are at the University of Massachusetts. With this paper, we kind of had in our mind, if you think about group compositions and think about teams that you're having to deal with, there's a lot of heterogeneity in terms of the types of people that are in groups, right? And we all know, and you can think of state department meetings, those that together, where you've got a group that otherwise might be really pleasant to be a part of, but you've got that one bad apple or that one sour person that just kind of spoils everything for otherwise good groups. So that kind of common wisdom is something that we're trying to look at in this situation. Somehow he ended up at the very end. I don't know how that happened. Okay, let's try again. All right, so not surprising to the people in this room, when you've got these social dilemma situations, we know that people cooperate much more in actuality than they do in your kind of technical, hardcore standard economic or evolutionary theory. And this has been largely motivated by the fact that people have social preferences, right? So they're not all devils, right? They may not be angels either, but there's other sorts of things that are going on, right? But it's not that everybody's the same, all right? There's a lot of heterogeneity that's out there. You've got different sorts of types of people and different types of preferences. And this is something that I think has come up in pretty much every talk that we've had here already, is that if you look at the population, there's different types of leadership styles, there's different types of social preferences. People are not all the same. Okay. When you start looking at some of the experimental literature that has tried to elicit these different types of people and categorize the social preference types, what we see is that there's basically the same types that are appearing across different populations and across different types of elicitation mechanisms. So you have kind of these selfish free rider types that tend to make up a substantial but not overwhelming portion of the population, so kind of 20 to 30 something percent, depending on what group you're looking at. Conditional cooperators or reciprocators that are kind of a third to maybe just over half of the population. Some kind of unconditional cooperators. These are the guys that are always trying to be nice and do the right thing no matter what other people in the group are doing. And then there's kind of a subset of other sorts of social preferences that we've seen, kind of depending on what's going on. These are in smaller proportions, maybe kind of 2, 3, 5% of the population. Right? Now, if you're able to control the group composition and kind of play God and make your own groups of people, right? We've seen that when you have groups with more cooperative types together, that contributions are higher, right? But there's a question as to why. In these studies, two things tend to be going on at the same time. One is that you've changed the group composition, right? You've put together people that are more similar to each other, but you've also changed the information that's made available, all right? So it's not just that the composition's different, right? People know that they're with other groups that are kind of like them, right? And so what we're trying to do in this study is to look at these as main effects and an interaction, right? So is this higher level of cooperation coming from this change in the group composition? Is it coming from this change in information that people have about the composition? Or is this interaction between the two factors required in order to get these gains in cooperation, right? So what we do is this is a two-stage experiment. The first stage is an internet elicitation of social preference types using the method that was designed by Fishbacher and Oliveira. Right? We type everybody who participates in the study. We invite into the lab the two largest portions of the population, the selfish or the free riders and the conditional cooperators. Since we already know who they are in terms of social preference type before they get into the lab, we're able to systematically control the group composition, as well as the information that's made available to the subjects in the experiment. And they would play a repeated public goods game, right, just your standard museum, collecting information about beliefs, and then we're trying to look at these impacts of group composition and information. So I'm going to talk just a minute about the type elicitation mechanism, because that sort of thing might not be familiar to everyone in the room, before we go on to the lab study. So in this elicitation, it's an internet study. We've got about 300 subjects. They participate at home. They just kind of log in whenever. It takes about 20 minutes to do. They agree to participate in a 2-part study. Right? We elicit both conditional and unconditional strategies. Right? So the unconditional strategy is what you kind of think of when you think of this public good game. All right? You're in this public good setting. How much do you want to give to the group count? Okay. The conditional strategy, all right, essentially elicits kind of a strategy method. So if the other people in your group give on average 0, what do you want to give? If the other people in your group give on average 1, what do you want to give? And so on and so forth. So you're able to get essentially a contribution profile for the individual based on what the other people in the group would do. Here is what the unconditional contribution looks like. All right, so we have this kind of design-specific calculator where they can put in different options for what they would do and what the other people, they think the other people in their group might do, so they can try out the environment and kind of get a feel for what they like best. And then they decide how many tokens they want to allocate to the group project and how many tokens they want to allocate to the project account. And here's what the conditional contribution screen looks like, right? So for their group's average allocation of 0, how much you want, 1, 2, and so on and so forth, up to the total number of tokens. This is done in an incentive-compatible method in that for every group, one person is chosen randomly to have this implemented. Okay? So there is a 1/3 probability that they're going to be playing, or that their payment is going to be determined by their conditional strategy, and 2/3 probability that their payment is going to be determined by their unconditional strategy. And this is what they look like. So for each of these graphs, right, we have kind of the average allocation and your allocation, right? So for what we see here, right, for your selfish and your free rider types, you've got very low or 0 contributions for each possible contribution of your group members. For our conditional cooperators, we see that contributions are kind of rising as group allocations rise. Notice that even within your conditional cooperating types, there's a lot of heterogeneity in terms of what exactly they're doing. So it's not that they're all straight on that 45-degree angle, but you do see this increase in trend. Okay. So now that we've typed people, we can bring them into black. What do we do? Right? So we're systematically controlling the group composition. So we've got groups of 3 selfish types, 2 selfish and 1 conditional, right? 1 selfish and 2 conditional, or groups of all conditional cooperators, right? They get information about either their own type or their own type plus the distribution of people that are in their group, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute, right? They then play a 15-round public bids game. We've got groups of 3 kind of normal per cap number of turns. These are partners treatment, so they're with the same group for all 15 rounds. And they get feedback about their earnings between rounds, but not information about what particular group members did in the previous round. All right, we also have beliefs listed in our circuit. So here's what the information screen is. So what we needed to do was to give them information about who they were and or information about who they were and the other people in the room, while doing our best to minimize demand effects and not call anybody jerks. All right, so we settled on calling people types A, B, C, and D. All right, we're particularly interested in what we've called A and B, but because we didn't want to signal that that's what we were interested in, we've got these other ones that are involved as well. Right? So type A people, remember that you participated in this other study. Based on what you did, we classified everybody. Right? So type A people allocate either nothing or a very low amount to the project, no matter what other people do. Type B people allocate more to the project as other people in their group allocate more. Type C people allocate a high amount no matter what, and type D people do something else. Right? You always get this box that says you have been classified as whatever.